I'd like to especially welcome Métis Elder Joanne Young and our Indigenous speakers, Sadie-Phoenix Lavoie and Hanna Edenshaw.
Hello.
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 My heartfelt thanks to Faith in the Common Good for providing this Zoom platform. Each gathering of the Global Catholic Climate Movement in Canada begins with a prayer and a land acknowledgement. So I pray a prayer for our earth. All-powerful God, you are present in the universe and in the smallest of your creatures. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty, bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. Encourage us in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen. And there are too many of us to give our land acknowledgement from where we are, so I will from where I am and from where I work. I respectfully acknowledge that where I work is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. I acknowledge the Haldimand Proclamation of 1784, where the land agreement with 6 nations extends 10 kilometers on both sides of the Grand River from its source to its mouth, and the Between the Lakes Purchase of 1792. A quick reminder of why GCCM Canada is hosting this webinar. 2 of the driving mandates of GCCM Canada are one, to help Catholics and others in Canada who are striving to respond to Pope Francis' call to an ecological conversion in their own lives and in our society. And 2, to listen to the voices and concerns of Indigenous social and ecological justice leaders and find ways to support each other in the important work we are doing. Our focus today is especially to listen to the voices of young people. Pope Francis recently wrote in Querida Amazonia, "Today, the Church is called to hear the plea of Indigenous peoples." At the same time, Pope Francis expresses his shame, and once more, he says, "I humbly ask forgiveness, not only for the offenses of the Church herself, but for the crimes committed against the Native peoples."
Agnes, will you just speak up a little bit more, please?
I'm sorry. I will raise my speaker a little bit. Is that better?
A little bit more.
A little bit more. Can you hear me now?
Mm.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Today, I would like to introduce to you 3 young people who share our concern for our common home. Hanna Edenshaw is a student from Masset, Haida Gwaii. She's an environmental activist who has been on protest lines to protect her homeland since before she could walk. She is the founder of Daman Tlagi, I hope I'm saying that right, Hanna. It means Protect the Land, a community of youth environmental organization. Hanna also helped her school get a machine that turns plastic into fuel. The Haida Nation has a strong history of standing up to colonial powers to protect their land. She draws on this history and takes the responsibility seriously. Hanna has been a youth representative for Haida Gwaii Communities against supertankers, and the Swalilwid, can you say that, Hanna? Swalilwid Sustainability Society's initiative to see that the islands become energy sovereign. She's spoken at the United Nations Permanent Forum for Indigenous Issues and is currently suing the federal Canadian government over climate change. Sadie-Phoenix Lavoie is an Anishinaabe Two-Spirit from Sagkeeng First Nation located on Treaty 1 territory. They graduated from the University of Winnipeg with a BA in Indigenous Studies and Political Science. They are currently community coordinator at Waniskatan, an alliance of hydro-impacted communities, and co-founder of Red Rising magazine. Sadie-Phoenix attended the UN COP22 in Marrakesh on behalf of the Canadian Climate Youth Coalition. They were one of 100 youth arrested on Parliament Hill protesting the Kinder Morgan pipeline and have been on the front lines at Standing Rock in protest of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Sadie-Phoenix has organized numerous community events around Indigenous inclusion and Indigenous climate justice. Sadie-Phoenix strives to honor the traditional roles of the Turtle Clan, spreading truth to all corners of society, and organizes action through a matriarchal approach of Indigenous leadership. And our last speaker will be Rebecca Rathbone. Rebecca is the Southwestern Ontario Animator for Development and Peace, Caritas Canada, the official humanitarian aid and international development organization of the Catholic Church in Canada. In this role, she supports the work of volunteer members who carry out DNP's education, advocacy, and fundraising campaigns in the Diocese of Hamilton, London, and St. Catharines. She also represents Canada on the global working group of the Global Catholic Climate Movement's Youth Wing, Laudato Si Generation, and helped this group present the Youth Climate Manifesto to Cardinal Tagle at World Youth Day 2019 in Panama City. Recently, she has also worked for Caritas Internationalis to help build and coordinate a youth program for the Caritas Confederation and its 160 plus member organizations around the world. She holds a Master's of Global Affairs degree from the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. Now, just let everyone know once more, each of our speakers will have 15 minutes to present. Those listening to the webinar will be muted, and if you have questions that you would like to ask following our speakers, please type your questions in the chat box. And Joe Gunn, who's a member of our GCCM Canada Advisory Circle, will be monitoring the chat box and read your questions afterwards. The webinar is recorded and will be available afterwards for future viewing. So at this point, I now pass the podium over to Hanna.
Thank you.
Hanna, you have been made a co-host, so you can use the share button if you like.
Nice. Let's present. You guys see the thing? Sorry, I'm bad with technology. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Hanna Edenshaw. I am from Haida Gwaii. I'm a member of the Sagkeeng clan, and my life has kind of revolved around my Haida culture and our art. As you see here, it's a very important part of my life. This is a totem pole made by my father, and this is a logo he did for my club de Montpellier, which is working to make Haida Gwaii plastic bag free. I have been on protest lines ever since I was very small. This is me protesting against trophy hunting. And I've always believed that it's my duty to protect my land and culture. I was born into a world in which I needed to struggle for my future. The purpose of my fight isn't to win. Like, I don't believe it's possible to protect the land and for me to do everything I want to. And I think people will always try and take, and they'll always win some of those fights. But my purpose is to keep the land for future generations so that they can fight for it as well. We'll lose when there's nothing left to fight for. And that's the only thing that's really hard to worry about. The importance of my land, as I was taught by elders and community members, has been instilled in me since I was a very small child, which is why I have been so active in environmental organizations and very passionate about my land and culture. I've kind of done two different routes of activism and my lawsuit, which are pretty interconnected but still separate parts of who I am. Firstly, I'm an Indigenous activist. You've already heard what I've already done, but currently I'm working to go speak at the United Nations in Geneva this coming summer on land rights, as it's a very pressing issue for Indigenous people all over the world. we have less than 5% of the world's population, about 25% of the world's landmass, and 80% of the world's biodiversity. So the key to ecological restoration really lies in the end of oppression of Indigenous people. So I'm like really honored to have that chance to speak and to have my voice heard. Also, as you all know, there's currently the Wet'suwet'en issue in Canada, where there are thousands of people all across our nation standing up in solidarity for the Wet'suwet'en people and for their oppression to end. And I believe it is so important as a fellow Indigenous person to be in solidarity with them as their rights are being taken away. Because firstly, because they shouldn't have the rights taken away like that, but also because I need that reassurance that there's this support system of other Indigenous nations when Canada starts to do something like that to me. I'm really proud of how this is going because for the first time in a very long time, it feels like the general public is actually paying attention. Like, I feel like what has always kept me going is my connection to the land, which is something I really cultivate. One of the ways is through a mentor apprenticeship program where I spend back on Haida Gwaii about 20 hours per week with a Haida elder. And yeah, it's been very difficult moving to Victoria for school and not being able to do that. But that deep connection to the land was instilled with me and still here, which brings me to environmental activism. This is one of my main passions. I currently go to a school, Pearson College, and I feel like we are doing a lot at this school for activism, but one thing is it's really hard. It's very remote, and so it's hard to be able to be involved in like main Victoria areas and still do your activism, which is why I find it easier to go through other routes, for example, the lawsuit. But in the past, I've founded Demond Clegay, and I've spoken at many different institutions, as well as being a member of Swiluid, which works for environmental sovereignty on Haida Gwaii through the means of sustainable practices. Finally, I'm suing the Canadian government for climate change. This is something we started in about April. I began the lawsuit because climate change isn't something that's going to happen in the future, as many people believe. It's something that's already affecting me today. It's affecting my sense of food security, of cultural security, on Haida Gwaii, and it's not just affecting me, it's affecting every Canadian. At my school, we have students from over 80 different countries, and we're only 200 students. I remember on the first week or the second week, everyone went in a circle, and we all said how we've been affected by climate change. And no matter what part of the world you were from, if it was Norway or Bangladesh, like every single person had a way they were affected. And they knew what was going to happen. They knew how it was going to get worse. They knew if their country would be flooded or fires would get worse or everything. And that's something that really affected me. But I don't lose hope, and I'm very motivated by the 14 youth who are suing the government with me. Some of them you could see in this picture. We are suing the government because they violated our charter rights, the right to life, liberty, and security of person, to equality and public trust rights as well, contributing to the climate crisis by continuing to support and promote fossil fuels. The public trust doctrine says that Canada has a legal responsibility to protect commonly held natural resources that we depend on, and they're not. So that's kind of the basis to the lawsuit. And what we're requesting is that Canada create and implement a science-based climate recovery plan. So that's in the works right now. And yeah, I feel like we have a lot of public support, which is good. Finally, I want to mention how hard it can be to be a youth activist sometimes, as like there's no time generally set for it. Like it's not something you could just do. It's something you have to make for yourself. Like, and personally, now that I'm at Pearson College, I find it's very hard to balance the schoolwork and the activism, and that's where I find support comes in. Like, I've been supported so much over these past few years by like the adults in my life, the elders for their wisdom, my peers, also future generations, my siblings. And I don't think I could have done it without those connections. And so I just really want to encourage everybody, if you take a message away from my talk, is that if you have any youth activists in your life or anyone you know who's really passionate about one of these issues, that you really support them, as like it's really hard to do without that. Also, as you guys know, I hope you know, about the Unistoten right now, the Wet'suwet'en, it's a really scary situation. And we really need Canada's, like, Canadians' continued interest and continued support, because that's kind of the only thing right now saving Indigenous people from being silenced. Like, and so I would really appreciate it if you looked into Unistoten if you don't know too much about them, and their legal fund could always use money, or they could always use people on the ground blockading. So yeah, because it's a really, really dire situation right now, I just figured I'd bring that up, as well as I have some other organizations that are like really vital to what I'm doing in the lawsuit. If you want to learn more about that, or what you could do in Canada to support environmental things, I'd like to suggest Our Children's Trust and the David Suzuki Foundation. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And yeah, I really appreciate that. So that was my talk. Do you know how to like not be the person?
And you just have to touch stop share at the very top of your screen.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Thank you. And you were wonderfully coherent, and I really love what you had to say. I will now pass the podium on to Sadie-Phoenix.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Anin, Buju, Migazi Ganawa Benija Gay Indigenous Sagkeeng Induji McNactodem. My name is Sadie-Phoenix Lavoie. That's my English name. My spirit name is Looking Eagle. I'm a member of Sagkeeng First Nation in Treaty 1. I reside here in Winnipeg, which is also located in Treaty 1 territory, which is Cree, Dakota, Anishinaabe, Dene, and Métis, and Oji Cree. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to Hanna. It's very inspiring to hear all the work that you've been doing and continue to do, and you know, keep it up. There's lots to do, and it's exciting to do this work alongside you. So yeah, I guess just give a little background. I currently work here at Winiskatan, I'm just chilling in the office, which works with hydro-impacted communities. And I also do stuff here in Winnipeg, particularly around Indigenous land rights, climate change awareness, and activism, if you want to call it that. But I prefer advocate because in a lot of ways, a lot of the work that we do is always amplifying the words or the needs or demands of others, of like what they need. And so, yeah, that's like what I do here now. But as you said, like before, I used to go to University of Winnipeg, and that was kind of where I started out my journey as being an advocate. I think I started university when I was like in 2012, so it was around the same time that I Don't Know War began. And it seems like not that long ago, but when you do calculate, it's like, 7-8 years ago, which is like blows my mind that I've been doing this since then. But yeah, that was definitely the catalyst for me, was being at university, learning about Indigenous studies and political science at the same time as I Don't Know More, the social movement was going on, because we had lots of conversations in our classrooms and with professors around these issues, and they always brought back down to the government and its lack of willingness, political willingness to adhere to the requests of the people, which was around environmental protections and water protection during the whole Stephen Harper era. I was engaged with the student politics at the university, so they had these student councils where we were able to, I guess, advocate for ourselves as young people, as Indigenous youth students. We led a campaign called Divestment, where we called on the University of Winnipeg to divest from fossil fuels within their endowment fund, which I believe was like, because we're still fairly a small university, I think it was only somewhere around $6 million that they were investing. And there's some, like the University of Manitoba, for instance, I think they're investing like somewhere around 50 million in fossil fuels. So we're like, well, you're actually in a good situation to divest and like pull your money out. Otherwise, you're going to lose money in the end. And that went on for a few years and didn't really get the same, I guess, victories as like some other universities across Canada have since. Yeah, so they're still working on it. I think they're doing like a Divest 2.0, trying to get the university to divest as well. But yeah, I guess that kind of like catalyzed me in like doing environmentalist work around fossil fuels. I had been engaged with the Indigenous Climate Action Network. I was actually on their steering committee, and they sent me some places. I went to Standing Rock a couple times and around the Kinder Morgan. We tried to do some Energy East protests here in Winnipeg. And then we also did the protests on Parliament, where I got detained and then got a 3-month trespassing ticket. So I was allowed to go to Parliament for 3 months because of that, which I actually hung that ticket up on my wall for like a long time. This was pretty funny. Just because, like, for one, it was, Ottawa is located on unceded Algonquin territory, and they were saying that I wasn't allowed to be there for 3 months. But anyways, yeah, some of the actions that I've been doing recently, which is centered around Wet'suwet'en, was like the occupation at Dan Vandel's office, who is the MP Liberal MP for Indigenous Affairs, or no, not Indigenous Affairs, Northern Affairs, which is pretty much majority Indigenous peoples anyways within his portfolio. And so we occupied his office for a total of 11 days. And we were one of the first occupations that happened during when, because we knew that the raid was going to happen on Gibden camp. We have friends that we were in contact with who were letting us know that they were planning on this, and so we called on Dan to see, like, this is the one avenue that we could go, which is towards the government and applying that pressure and seeing what they can do in his power to talk to Bill Blair, who is the safety commissioner, who is like his portfolio's RCMP, and trying to see if, like, can you hold off for a bit until we can figure something out, until, like, the government and these chiefs can come to some different type of resolution. And he was basically saying that he had no power, federal government has no jurisdiction, blah, 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 blah. And basically just passing the buck, which is pretty common for a lot of these actions, and saying that, like, oh, I'm not the only one that holds all the power and all the say. It's like, no, of course we know that, but like, at least then we're still pressuring you and, making sure that you're doing something about it, rather than just assuming you have no responsibility at all, which is pretty common when it comes to government. They're like, oh, that's not my portfolio. They're like, oh, there's only so much I can do. But anyways, he did have a meeting with him. Nothing really came out of it. He didn't really tell us what happened. So then we continued to occupy. Then he had met with some of the youth at the occupation, I think via phone. And they're like, we're speaking to, like, mostly his assistant. So of course they were so frustrated that nothing was coming out of it. He was also facing a lot of pressure from the government to, like, not do anything. He ended up meeting with Jerry Daniels with Southern Chief Organization, SCO. It's one of our regional governments here in Manitoba. Met with him under the radar without telling us, as a way of diverting away from what was going on in his office to, oh, let's just talk to some Indian Act Chief and Council regional government, and hopefully that will slow things down, or either, like, calm things down. But I was talking to Jerry about it too, and they were, same thing.
Sadie, can I ask the question?
Yeah.
If you were to send a message to the Catholics that are here on this webinar, is there a way that we can assist what you're doing, or is there an organization that we should connect with?
Yeah, I was just going to get into that. So ultimately, with the occupation ended because they knew that Dan wasn't going to do anything, and that we were probably better off utilizing our resources in other areas. And, like, during this whole 11 days, we had seen sparks and rallies, and we had organized 3 here in Winnipeg that were, like, lots. And, like, the media is obviously trying to reframe the subject, but everyone started focusing on rail lines, like railways, as a way of pressuring the government by applying pressure on the economy. And I think that's also, like, super important, because it's the economy that's the problem, and I don't think everyone's kind of focusing on that as well, or enough. And so I think the best way for people to support is obviously going to those types of actions, and keeping the momentum going, and having that solidarity, because the media is going to focus on the economic pressures that they're under, and they're also going to be relying on public opinion. And so that's the only reason why the government hasn't done anything, or hasn't tolerated, RCMP hasn't done another raid, was because they know that so many people and Canadians, non-Indigenous supporters, are paying attention. And, you know, so the media is going to try to switch that around and say, oh, reconciliation. We're not doing a good job at reconciling, and that's onus onto Indigenous peoples, but that's not true. The only way to reconcile in an effort of this situation is actually to go out and to support the land defense that is going on, and to amplify the messages that they're doing, and applying that pressure to the government and saying, hey, we don't like you trying to sway the narrative onto Indigenous peoples who have every right to defend themselves legally, and that the application of the rule of law onto unceded Wet'suwet'en lands is colonialism. And so I guess making sure that when we challenge people within our own circles and our own networks, is that we're keeping to the T that point around sovereignty, rule of law, the way the media uses economy and reconciliation, and being mindful of those things. Because like what we need is people to be educated on the matter. And we need people that are going to pressure the government, people that are going to come to the land and come to our actions and are going to donate to the legal fund, who are also willing to put themselves on the line to be arrested, because that's just the way things have led. And that's just what needs to happen. And so that's what is happening. So the best way for any type of organization to support is to, pressure the government, send those letters, because they do get them and they have to respond to them. Donating to legal fund, to educate, fundraise, all of those things are very, very crucial. Yeah. What else was I going to say? Yeah, intervene, lobby, and like challenging those colonial narratives in the media. And I think that's like super important. Writing your own op-eds, holding webinars like this where it continues the dialogue. I think when the government's waiting for when the public no longer is paying attention, the government and RCMP are waiting until the public no longer cares or is upset in order to vilify us Indigenous peoples who are literally upholding Indigenous law, Indigenous sovereignty, decolonial frameworks around dealing with the economy. And you have young people who are rising up and doing that work. You have matriarchs going up there and doing that work. And so it's just a moment in history at this point, and it's a matter of like, it's happening. Are you going to be a part of it or not? And how do you want to be a part of it? So you can have a little influence, or you can have a huge influence, a little impact or a big impact. It's all up to what you're most comfortable with, but knowing that it needs to be done and it's happening already.
Sadie-Phoenix, this is your 1 minute flag.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that I'm working on right now, aside from following everything that's going on with Wet'suwet'en, is I'm organizing an international day of action called World Water Day on March 22nd. And if that's something that anybody is interested in, please let me know. Email me at sadie@hydroimpacted.ca. We're focusing on all types of water issues like water rights, legal rights, water, respect for water, protecting water. You have like water protectors. What is a water protector? And so yeah, there's we're trying to get community hosts to organize either panel discussions or webinars or rallies or anything surrounded around water. And so yeah, that's on March 22nd. So yeah, let me know if that's something that you want to do. We've been in contact with some folks in India and Panama, United States, sightsee in Muskrat Falls and Labrador. So I'll put my email in the chat for folks. Yeah, I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out.
Sadie, Sadie-Phoenix at the bottom of your screen, it says
Oh yeah, I see it.
chat,
I see it
and then
now.
you can make sure that you've clicked to everyone when you put in your email. Thank you very much.
But yeah, anyways, thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you. and now, Rebecca Rathbone. And I believe Rebecca has slides to share as well.
I do. I'll try to get that up as quickly as I can. Is desktop 1? Sorry, folks. It's telling me I need to change a. Okay. I can't figure this out in the next. Oh, is it
There we
working?
go.
Yes?
We've got your screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I'm gonna get thumbs up from Agnes if we're good to go. Okay, great. 2. Oh, wow. Okay. So thanks for having me, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be talking to you this afternoon about Laudato Si Generation, which is the global youth movement of the Global Catholic Climate Movement. And I got involved in this because it's very closely aligned to my own work with development and peace. And I find that as I work for development and peace longer, and as I evolve in my faith, I become more motivated to care for the earth, so much so that caring for the earth has certainly become a fundamental part of my faith. And so when I was invited to join the working group of Laudato Si Generation, I said yes in all caps. And I've been very happy to be a part of this group. So just to put it into context so we're all on the same page, we know that the Global Catholic Climate Movement Canada is a chapter of the larger Global Catholic Climate Movement, so a global confederation, if you will, of Catholics who are, conscious of caring for the earth. And so as we continue to operate here as GCCM Canada, it's good to remember that there's a sort of mothership operating as well, the global machine that's headquartered in Rome. And so the Laudato Si Generation is an initiative of that global movement. Laudato Si Generation was officially launched at World Youth Day last year in Panama in January, so it's still relatively new. And how they launched it was through a series of meetings with people from all over the world in Panama, to craft a manifesto, which I'll be talking about in just a couple minutes, but also to share with each other what climate reality looks like in each of our home contexts and what young people are currently doing to address this, and the strengths that we find that young people bring to these initiatives. And we also brainstormed together what sort of resources could be helpful to support young people who are engaging in climate justice initiatives. So from this starting point, we have a working group that meets regularly every 3 weeks over Zoom to bring this vision of Laudato Si Generation to life, and it's that working group that I'm a part of. So the purpose of Laudato Si Generation is to coordinate the initiatives of Catholic youth who are caring for the earth, and to learn from each other so that we can maximize everyone's contributions to these efforts. Also to spread the message of Laudato Si among youth, especially Catholic youth, but not limited to Catholic youth, because as we know, Laudato Si is written to everyone and invites everyone to participate in caring for our common home. And also to bring a global youth voice to supporting the ecological mandate of the Catholic Church. And so when you bring a global youth voice, you're obviously bringing a comprehensive youth voice, because we all come from different realities and contexts. So the structure as it is now is that it's a working group made of Catholic climate leaders, young Catholic climate leaders, supported by a central staff person from the GCCM. And we meet every 3 weeks, like I say, and we have subcommittees as well who work on more particular issues. So for example, we have a subcommittee on advocacy who's working towards supporting divestment initiatives from fossil fuels. We have a communications team that works on a social media plan and that sort of thing. I'll give you a highlight of some of our initiatives that we are working on, and I'll start with the manifesto that I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. This was crafted over a few days in Panama ahead of the final masses of Panama, and it's the most significant document that we've crafted to date, so this is why I'm spending a little bit more time on it. And it was presented to Cardinal Tagle, who accepted it on behalf of the church and also said very positive things about this initiative on January 25th of last year, after the Way of the Cross Mass on the main World Youth Day stage in front of over 500,000 pilgrims who were there from all over the world. So I'm telling you all this to show that it's a big deal to have been given the space to do this, right? World Youth Day, if you're not aware, is a global gathering of Catholic young people that's very, very well attended, into the millions. And so to have been given the space to present this manifesto at arguably the largest Catholic event on earth, it's significant that the church allowed us to do this, which shows how the church is taking the issue of climate change seriously and also takes the GCCM seriously too. And it's a big deal for Cardinal Tagle to have received it as well. So if you're not sure who he is, he's the Archbishop of Manila in the Philippines, but he's also the president of Caritas Internationalis, which is the official aid and development arm of the Catholic Church. And he's now holds a very high position in the Vatican, the prefect for the Congregation of the Evangelization of Peoples. Ultimately means he oversees the operations of the church around the world and does very important tasks like appoints bishops. So he's a very, very important, influential figure in the Catholic Church on a global level. And so for him to have accepted the invitation to receive this manifesto was very, very significant. So on the screen there, you can see the link where you can find the manifesto if you'd like to read it in full, but I will give you a sort of Coles Note summary of it. It begins with 3 commentaries on some of the issues that Laudato Si Generation found to be some of the most pressing concerns about climate change. The first is acknowledging that climate change is an injustice that's particularly against the poor and also against future generations. As young people, of course, we acknowledge this. The second is the crucial need for authentic and urgent ecological conversion. So this is the need to take our roles as stewards of creation very seriously, and the need for repentance and recognizing how we have sinned against the earth in the past, and that fact that we must work to correct these errors. And this ties into something that Agnes even said earlier about this new document that Pope Francis wrote, Querida Amazonia, where he says we need to acknowledge the errors that we've made in terms of relations with Indigenous people. Acknowledging these errors and correcting them is really important here. And then the third commentary is on the potential for young people to be able to step up and become significant actors in the church's climate action and the whole world's climate action. So we acknowledge here that young people want to offer the fruits of our talents, and we're ready to assume our responsibility to be stewards of creation. So next, we outline 6 commitments of Laudato Si Generation. First, we commit to live Laudato Si concretely in our daily lives by developing an ecological spirituality. Again, this means acknowledging that the earth is a gift from God and it's up to us to care for it. The second is to study, and so to better understand ecological issues in order to be better prepared to advance transformation that's required at all levels of society. The third is to faithfully challenge bishops and church leaders to take the ecological crisis more seriously. And we're encouraged in this actually by Pope Francis himself, who encourages young people very frequently to be sort of troublemakers in a good way, but to disrupt things so that the church and the world doesn't become complacent and grow stagnant in our comfort zones. The fourth commitment that we make is to support the church in doing this by offering our time and our talents to help others care for creation. It's not enough to just say, you know, the church is not doing a good job, be a troublemaker that way. We need to offer our talents in order to help all of us to do better. And so this is the fourth commitment. The fifth is to stand in solidarity with others who are protecting our common home while remaining true to our identity and understanding of the situation. And the sixth is to coordinate common efforts of Catholic youth who are working on climate issues and to learn from each other in order that we can all make the best contributions possible. So those are our commitments that we all promise to make. And then, of course, we handed to Cardinal Tagle the demands that we have for the church. So there are 4 of them for the church. The first is to encourage ongoing ecological conversion at all levels. And this should be accompanied by special initiatives to nurture the ecological dimensions of our faith. And so by this, the main point is that we want to move from a situation where ecological justice is a sort of marginal, episodic interest piece, and move towards it being actually a systemic, organic commitment of our faith as Catholics. The second is to promote sustainable and simple lifestyles, and especially this means we want the church to transition to 100% renewable energy and net zero carbon emissions by 2030 or earlier. So there are actually great strides being made by the Catholic Church around the world in this issue. In fact, CAFOD, one of Development and Peace's sister organizations through the Caritas Network, has encouraged the Catholic Church in England and Wales to divest from fossil fuels. And I think 20 out of 22 dioceses there have divested already. And the other 2 are just finishing up contracts they can't get out of before they divest as well. So really positive actions have already been taken in this area. And then the third is to adopt ethical investment guidelines, especially divestment from fossil fuels for all ecclesial bodies and Catholics to follow. And actually divestment is now becoming for Laudato Si generation a very key issue that we're working on. We're talking about it a lot in our meetings and how we as young people can encourage people to divest from fossil fuels. And then the fourth is to meaningfully empower young people to lead care for creation programs and to advance ecological defense projects. And of course, in all of this, we do recognize the value of Indigenous knowledge, the crucial importance, rather, I should say, of Indigenous knowledge. And in fact, in the photo that you can see on the slide here, when we presented this manifesto to Cardinal Tagle, we wanted to make sure we had Indigenous presence there. So this young woman who you see in the photo is an Indigenous woman from Brazil who helped us to present the manifesto and spoke to the over 500,000 pilgrims on behalf of her people, which was really important. And next, we lay out 5 demands for politicians and other competent institutions. The first of that is to achieve, like we said before, 100% renewable energy and put an end to the fossil fuel era. The second is to implement the Global Compact for Migration to support environmental refugees. The third is to protect at least 30% of the planet's ecosystems by 2030, and in this to give special attention to Indigenous communities. The fourth is to actively commit to universal and fair access to drinking water by 2030, which is in line with the SDG Goal 6. And the fifth is to adopt a circular economy model and to challenge, as Pope Francis says in Laudato Si, the modern myth of unlimited material progress and unlimited growth. So, and the manifesto ends by inviting all young people, all young Catholic people, anybody who wants to join us, And if you'd like to support this manifesto, you can actually by going to the link that you see on the screen there and signing this letter that is in support of the manifesto. So I do highly encourage all of you to sign it if you agree with all of the things I just said. So that's, like I say, our main document that we've created so far, and we're using it a lot for advocacy purposes. But other initiatives that we do, or have done rather, is of course just general participation in World Youth Day this year for the first time. The GCCM was did somewhat participate in the World Youth Day in Krakow, Poland in 2016, but this was a lot more targeted participation and received quite well. So we also participated in the International Youth Forum, which was organized in June by one of the Vatican departments, the Dicastery of Laity, Family, and Life. And you can see in the photo there, Luke and Karina. Luke is from the States and Karina's from Austria, and they gifted Pope Francis a solar-powered thermos from Laudato Si Generation. And apparently he loved it.
Rebecca, sorry, this is your 1 minute notice.
Okay, perfect, thank you. We also participate in the Fridays for Future climate strikes regularly, and especially during the global weeks of action, especially the ones in September. And I just wanted to share very quickly how the youth in Canada engage in these initiatives, because the organization I work for, Development and Peace, is actually a partner member of the GCCM and GCCM Canada. So we currently have a campaign happening called For Our Common Home, which talks about the importance of the Amazon, educates about what's happening to the Amazon and the people who live there, and encouraging people from Canada to take part in protecting it. So two initiatives that we're organizing are an intergenerational pledge, where we're encouraging people of all ages to take a photo like the ones you see on the screen, with a heart that says, I care for our common home, and use this opportunity to make a commitment to care for the earth in a special way. It could be using your car less, it could be not using single-use plastics, anything you'd like. So we encourage everyone to take this pledge. So all of you on the call are very welcome to join us in doing that. And then we also have a solidarity letter addressed to 2 communities in Brazil who our partners are serving. Our goal is to collect 65,000 signatures, and we're at about 34,000, so about halfway there. So again, everyone on the call, we'd love it if you could sign the letter at the link that you see. And actually in the summer, we have a youth group, a solidarity tour of our youth members who will be delivering all of these letters in person to those 2 communities. So a really important act of solidarity from the youth in Canada there. And then on this last slide, I just wanted to share our contact information if you have any questions or are interested in learning more about anything I spoke about. You can reach us on those websites or on those social media handles or those email addresses. So just to sum up very quickly, Development and Peace does this work on behalf of our partners globally, but it's really important for us that, to bring the point out that when we care for the earth here and stand up for Indigenous people here, we're doing the same for people in all areas of the earth. So thank you for listening to my talk, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about it.
Thank you so much, Hannah, Sadie-Phoenix, and Rebecca. We got a lot to think about. You've shared a lot with us. Joe, have you found some great questions to ask these young people?
We have some good questions. We'll see how much time we have. There were quite a few questions about what people that are participating in the webinar can actually do to support you. You've all mentioned certain things that we could do. Maybe another way to go about this is if each of you would mention in just a minute or so, what is a piece of support you've received from others that's really encouraged you? So maybe start with Hanna.
I think one of the main pieces of support was just by adults in positions where they're able to help you and they're kind of believe in you, because okay, I have 2 actually, because I just thought of 2 really good ones that are really different. So firstly, last April, the Canadian Quaker Foundation actually funded and assisted me. And without them, I wouldn't have been able to go to New York to speak at the United Nations. And so that belief in a 15-year-old kid that, like, yes, we'll take her to the United Nations, and she could speak again and again, like, that is very rare, but like, it empowered me beyond anything I could ever express. And the second thing is, like, as a youth activist, I don't know if you guys know, but like, climate anxiety is this feeling a lot of youth have nowadays where you think about your future and then you're like, oh yeah, that won't happen because of climate change. And the world's not going to be.
Oh, did we lose the sound?
Hanna, we've lost your sound, yeah.
Do you have it again?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. We just accept that we're going to have climate anxiety, and that, like, no matter what we do, there's always this kind of hopeless feeling, at least for me. And what I have found is some of the best support is, especially from like elders in my community and other people my age, is just that hope that, like, everyone, people who've been through so much more than you, but they've kept hope, like, that's taught me so much about how important it is to keep it, and how, like, it kind of gives me strength to have that hope. I feel like that could really apply to the Catholics as well, just because, you know, faith in God gives you a lot of hope. So that's for me.
Thanks, Hanna. Sadie, do you have something you'd like to share?
I guess, like, the main support that I've gotten from a lot of, like, I guess when people, like, show up that, like, you know, you've never seen before, and you're just kind of curious, and you know, like, I really like to hear what people say and, like, what got them to feel motivated enough to come. Because, like, for one, like, we've been doing this for a long time, and so, like, clearly they've been aware of, like, these types of actions or these social movements, and so I'm more curious as to, like, what got them to feel empathetic. Like, what moment in time did it switch for them? Because that's, like, always been my challenge, is to get, like, not just passive people, but, like, a lot of, like, the extreme opponents to kind of, like, you know, look within themselves. As like, helpful for me to be able to have those types of conversations with people who are very, very heavily opposing, because that just seems to be what I ended up doing anyways. I find I'm like a cushion for a lot of activists or advocates who, you know, do get triggered very easily, and, like, when they come across somebody who's very opposing, you know, it takes a toll on a lot of activists, and so trying to figure out better ways of, like, shifting that. So, like, you know, learning for myself is, like, how can I emotionally connect to somebody to get them to change their viewpoint? Those are just things that I personally do, that I've gotten help from, like, a lot of, like, people who have never done direct action before, and then, like, just show up. It's like, what made you feel inclined to come here? I want to know.
Right.
Because that helps me see what their intentions are. Because if it's just something for them to be like, well, what's this all about? Like, teach me everything. There's just, like, some things I'd like to know, just so I know how to better educate. And then the other thing is, like, financially supporting. I've been, like, in super burnout, and then somebody just sent me a bunch of money, and I'm like, okay, thank you, because then I can pay my bills. Because, you know,
that works for me too.
Because, you know, like, a lot of this work, you know, a lot of us have to take just part-time jobs, or, like, you know, you're working multiple jobs to not only survive, but make sure that, like, we have the flexibility to react to activism. And it's not to say, you know, we don't have jobs, but, you know, that we need to have that flexibility in our lives to be able to react to things on any given moment. So that's like, I've had to frame my life around activism, even in my workplace.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's just like one thing that personally, that's like, I've noticed it helped is like having a network of allies who are there. Like say I'm in like, I can call upon them and know that they're educated enough, that they're like have good intentions, and are only trying to like lighten my load or lighten the load of like other Indigenous youths who will like literally step in and say like, hey, I got this. Go take care of yourself for a minute, and like, are accepting of Indigenous leadership, and that are okay being led by Indigenous people, and to like know that we have a lot on our plates, and so for them to take a little bit of that on sometimes. That helped a lot in the occupation at Dan and Dell's office, where we had a lot of allies just coming in and doing overnight shifts, and like donating food and firewood and donating to the legal fund. And like,
Sadie-Phoenix?
Yeah.
Sorry, we're at
Sorry, I know I
4.
go rambling on, but I'm just saying like that's just something
That's okay.
that helped a lot.
I've been given the high sign. I don't know if Rebecca would like to take a minute or two. A number of people have dropped off because they have to leave at 4. But if Rebecca would like to take a minute or two with that answer.
Sure. Wait. Oh, I'm not muted at all. Sorry.
Nope.
I'll be quick. I think that the support that we get from each other within the Laudato Si Generation Working Group is really meaningful. If somebody has a bad experience, there are people there to say, to comfort them. And if somebody has a good experience, everybody's really good at, lifting them up and congratulating them. So that's really meaningful. But also, the support that we get from the Catholic community is also quite meaningful. I remember in September when my friend was organizing her strikes in Melbourne, Australia, they convinced the churches to ring their bells during the climate strike to encourage all of the strikers. And they said that it was actually quite beautiful, that the church was showing this very meaningful, very vocal act of solidarity as they were striking for that purpose. So I thought that was a really nice story. And then, of course, when we receive support from people like Cardinal Tagle, who agreed to stay late at the Way of the Cross Mass and receive the Manifesto, and even from Pope Francis, who gave us a wave as well. Getting those encouragements from people who are are high level and have the ability to make the changes that we're asking for always feels really good too.
Great.
Thank you. And I'm sorry we don't have time for any more questions. But as I said earlier, the webinar is recorded. People will be able to receive links to both the audio recording and the chat box, which is a part of the video portion. Thank you so much, Hanna, Sadie-Phoenix, and Rebecca. It's been a pleasure having you as part of this call. And thank you everyone for joining the call. Have a good afternoon, everyone.